President Trump is going on the offensive after Joe Biden announced Senator Kamala Harris as his VP nominee. The president went after Harris's selection by appearing to return to a familiar criticism.
She was extraordinarily nasty to Kavanaugh. She was nasty to a level that was just a horrible thing, the way she treated now Justice Kavanaugh. And I won't forget that soon. Plus, she was very, very nasty to, one of the reasons that surprised me, she was probably nastier than even Pocahontas to Joe Biden. She was very disrespectful to Joe Biden, and it's hard to pick somebody that's that disrespectful. I thought she was the meanest, the most horrible, most disrespectful of anybody in the U.S. Senate.
Skyler Henry joins me now from the White House. Hi there, Skyler. Senator Harris is not the first person to be called nasty by the president. Who else has he leveled that particular attack on?
Well, Elaine, good afternoon to you. This certainly appears to be a similar rhetoric that the president has had when describing women. A lot of critics have said that this is sexist comments from the president. We've also heard that there are potential dog whistles hinting at racism in some of the comments that he makes towards women, and just from his comments yesterday during his press briefing. But in terms of people that he's used this phrase or description nasty to in the past, we've seen him describe Speaker Nancy Pelosi that way in the past, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle that way, but perhaps most notably his Democratic opponent in 2016, Hillary Clinton there, where the two had a very contentious back and forth as they were making their way to try to see who was going to be the next president of the United States here. But you have a lot of critics saying that this is not the time for that in terms of trying to unify the country here. And so the president reverted back to some of that rhetoric. And so now we're starting to see a lot of people kind of call him out on it, at least in terms from a critic's perspective, and just trying to say, hey, listen, we've heard this in the past. It's starting to become a trend here. And so now it's time that we move on to something else.
So our colleague, 2020 campaign reporter Nicole Sganga, reports on the differing responses from GOP officials, the Trump campaign, the president, and the vice president about the selection of Senator Harris. What's behind that discord?
Well, I think it's in terms of strategy at this point, right? We've already seen members of the Trump campaign come out to say that Kamala Harris is extremely far left-leaning, extremely progressive in terms of her political career. Members of the RNC countered that and said that she wasn't necessarily as progressive as, say, a Bernie Sanders, somebody who is extremely left-leaning in terms of his politics. And so I think there's a lot of mixed messages here from what we've seen from the GOP. And then you have people who've said all along that Kamala Harris is a candidate and a politician who has kind of straddled that line, so to speak, of progressive and conservative in terms of her approach to her politics, given her track record in California. And so I think now is a time that I think a lot of members of the Republican Party are just trying to iron out what their message is going to be, what their rhetoric is going to be as they continue to move forward here after the presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden named Kamala Harris just yesterday. And so now we're starting to see this kind of come at all different angles here to just try to see what sticks in terms of constituents to try to latch on to. And so now, as I said before, you're having the somewhere in the too progressive to just progressive enough to counter everything that the president stands for. And so I think that is the rhetoric that we're starting to see now from Republicans.
And Skyler, is there a sense about how Harris's own campaign for president might impact the Trump campaign strategy?
Well, what I think is you'll start to see a lot of the points that Kamala Harris made when she was running for president start to come up perhaps in the rhetoric of the president even. You have to remember it was very contentious between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on the debate stage last year, all the way up until she announced that she was not going to continue her run for president. So you maybe will see some of the talking points and some of the rhetoric start to come into the Trump campaign administration's message as they continue to move forward. And then obviously, as you heard from the president yesterday during his press briefing, how he felt as though Kamala Harris was in terms of her interrogation with Brett Kavanaugh, in terms of just the approach that she's had to the job. I think you'll start to see some of the descriptors there kind of play into some of the things that the president felt as though was, to use his word, nasty.
Before we let you go, Skyler, I want to ask about another topic. There are reports that Defense Secretary Mark Esper will be leaving his post after the election. Is he leaving, or was he asked to leave? And what is Esper's relationship with the president?
Well, no one said anything concrete just yet. From what we have seen and been told, it looks as if that he will leave his post after the election, no matter who wins. What we've seen is statements from the Department of Defense saying that Secretary Esper serves at the pleasure of the president. We've seen White House officials kind of sidestep that question when asked in the past. But you have to remember that relationship between Mark Esper and the president started to deteriorate sometime in June, right, where we had that clash between protesters and active duty military, in which Esper said that he simply did not agree with the call to put those troops out there with those protesters. And ever since then, it's just been a deteriorating relationship between the two parties, or so, not necessarily knowing just how that relationship stands up until this point. But as I said, it is looking more and more likely there that regardless of who wins here, he is going to step down come November.
All right, Skyler Henry at the White House for us. Skyler, thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.